Hey guys, in this video I just want to go over a couple more good and bad things, and then just general notes. So starting from the beginning, you can see that this one also has a bit of discussion. We've talked about those initial discussions before. The key thing for this one, it's relatively small, right? And there's not really any major thing. We're sort of just pontificating at them. I don't know why there are two spaces after every period. But we're sort of just pontificating at them, right? And so what we can do is actually, instead of making this be its own question and say, you know, I was hyped on after you finish reading this whole thing, in order to like sort of speed up the process, we can just add that first question directly into the array, that discussion. So this actually works out pretty conveniently in this particular case because this one, when it was done, was also done without adding in, I'm gonna make that bold now, without adding in that initial question number, right? So, sorry, just a little bit of weirdness there. So we can just add that question number in and we can take it out of right here. We're gonna say, you know, let's have this. I'm just gonna make everything Times New Roman, and I'm just going to double check the spacing because sometimes if the spacing is weird, it causes the fonts to change automatically like that, which drives me bananas. Alright, cool. So now we've added that in, right, and so at the very end, we'll notice we have this whole discussion. At the end, usually what I like to do is I'm going to make this question, the final question, bold as well. So that way it stands out a little bit more. It's going to be, you know, there's this enter, there's spacing here. But I do want it to show up a little bit more obviously. And then we've got this, you know, lovely answer over here. And then this is the really cool thing. So now we don't have to renumber it, right? So this just goes straight into 2. That's super great. The next thing that I want to highlight is, so on this one, there are actually, so you can see if we go from the end here, there's 1, 2, 3 spaces in between each question. So we're going to take that out. That's not what we want. We want exactly 2 spaces, no more, no fewer. So find and replace. I'm going to replace caret P, so 3 enters with only caret P, 2 enters. And I'm going to replace all. So super fast. If you guys don't know these things, caret P is the same as like an enter, right? So it's like a paragraph break, I think is the way that they call it, or something of that nature. So caret P, it'll find every single time there is an enter and it'll replace it with something. That's pretty cool. I use that later on. You don't necessarily have to use it, but if you've got like 3 spaces and you want to take out some spaces, it's a really easy way to do it. So now we have this. The next thing, and I believe final thing for the array that I want to talk about is, you can see that this one does not have a question number associated with it. It will not show up, it will break the array, right? Every single thing has to have a question number. It's super important. All the question numbers have to have colons. I will say it a million times. It's super important, right? So, this question, super good. It's totally fine. We'll just go, right, so this question is referring to this original one up here. We can add alerts for these later. These were just their drawing alerts, so they're a little bit more complicated to add. So this one is going to then be added to the next question. I'm going to cut this out, take away that extra space, and this is going to go right there at the start of our next question, and then we're going to have like an enter there as well. So it's going to say the Pythagorean theorem is this, enter. If you have a right triangle, then colon, enter, enter, and then here's, you know, the Pythagorean theorem, which we all know. And then, because all of that comes at the top, this is also bold, so I don't want to have too many things that are bold. I might leave this one, and maybe I'll just make find the hypotenuse bold. Yeah, that's not what I intended to do. Cool. Save. So find the hypotenuse, that'll be bold. That way we just, again, we're focusing on that final question, focusing the student a little bit on that final question, and it works out pretty well. And then the final thing that I'm going to do, this one, we want to make sure that there's an extra space there, but that end of worksheet is super good. The final thing I want to do is obviously make sure that my question numbers match, because I did maybe change them, maybe not. So I'm going to scroll down to the end of this worksheet. And we do have 11 questions. How fancy is that? So that's perfect. 11, 11. Very good. One other thing, so at the end, just make sure there's no extra spaces. There were a couple. Don't leave extra spaces after the end of the worksheet. It does like a weird thing on my end, so try not to if you can. And then I want to talk about a couple good things in terms of the formatting of this worksheet. So we want to think about, right, the worksheet is the thing that the student sees. This is what the student sees. This is not what the student sees. Obviously, this looks like garbage. It's going to come out looking real nice later, but it doesn't look real nice right now. So this is what the student sees, and we want it to look nice. We want it to have a lot of white space. We want them to have enough space to draw a right triangle. So the drawing thing needs to have a little bit of extra space. Maybe even more is fine. That's totally good. But these simpler questions, like this is an easy way, just like an angle that measures 90 degrees, right? That's not too complicated. So they don't need a whole lot of space to be able to write that out. And then these two, so these two are actually just referring to that triangle we just drew up here. Well, the student would have just drawn. And so, so we don't actually really need space for those at all. And that's pretty cool. And then this person also, you know, did a page break in order to get to the next thing. This is also super great. We like it. Yeah. The formatting on this one, like find the hypotenuse, it doesn't necessarily have to match in terms of bold because it just looks different on the worksheet. So don't worry about that. But do try to keep things relatively consistent in any way that it seems like they might need to be consistent. But this is super great. This is like one of the first sort of bigger, maybe more complex questions on the worksheet, and it's all by itself. That's awesome. We very, very often will put questions on worksheets all by themselves on the page. That's the only thing on the page. Even if it's not like too terribly hard of a question, or the question wouldn't necessarily take an advanced student a whole lot of space, still plenty of students come in. They're not necessarily as advanced, and so we're going to leave a lot of space there. And we continue to do this for the rest of the worksheet. So this one's on its own page, this one's on its own page, and that's really great. These last two are just sort of verification questions. We use this a lot. It's basically like, did you pay any attention at all to the worksheet, right? So we talked about in the worksheet, you guys probably didn't take the second to read it, but the distance formula is just a very complicated thing, and it's essentially just like, you know, derived from the Pythagorean theorem. So let's just remember the Pythagorean theorem. And so these are just review questions, relatively simple. They can go on the same page. That's cool. That's the couple of things that I have for you in this video. Any questions about that, send them my way, and that's all.